Hi, I'm a dopamine addict. It's been 2 minutes from my last hit, and I did it for hours. What he meant to say was, I was playing video games, then stopped to eat some chocolate cake, then started to scroll through social media. What he was supposed to be doing was working, exercising, and studying. In today's technological society, we are bombarded with a rapid-fire stimulus of social media scrolling, videos, music, and the need to be connected for fear of missing out, or FOMO. We can multitask like no other time in history, exercise with music in our headphones, text or FaceTime a friend, drink an energy drink, all while working out with a friend, or playing an online video game while wearing a headset with a microphone and earphones, communicating with your team to find and eliminate your enemies, all while eating a chocolate cake and washing it all down with an energy drink. This is the norm, which causes a constant and consistent high release of dopamine. And this is a lot more fun than studying, reading, or working. The reason is this: dopamine. This is what dopamine looks like. So what is dopamine? Dopamine is a neurotransmitter which allows nerves to communicate directly to one another, like a messenger, like one person texting another. And dopamine is also considered a neuromodulator. And this is where one nerve sends out multiple signals, as in a person sending out a mass text message. Dopamine is considered a modulator of both learning and motivation. Dopamine has been called the feel-good or pleasure chemical. It is the driving force behind our motivation for pleasure, as in sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and the associated feelings from dopamine release. It's what actually makes us seek out things we like, things that we learned that are pleasurable. Dopamine is created in the brain by taking an amino acid named tyrosine and converting it to a precursor called dopa, which is then converted into dopamine. We need dopamine. Normal levels of dopamine help us to be focused, attentive, productive, creative, motivated, and driven, to be aware and care for others, to feel good and actually move, physically move. It is much more rewarding to play video games, surf social media for hours, as they continually cause the release of dopamine and the pleasure associated with whatever activity. These can be known as dopamine hits. Many times it is the anticipation of the reward that can be more motivating than the actual task or indulgence. Dopamine also influences our desires and cravings and motivations. However, it is a fine line between normal levels and not normal levels, whether too little or too much. Low levels of dopamine can lead to the opposite of the positive effects of dopamine, such as insomnia, becoming unfocused, unproductive, uncreative, unmotivated, depressed, sad, and can increase physical pains, lead to mood disorders, and impair overall judgment. But too much or excessive activation of the release of dopamine may lead to us avoiding the things we need to do, like eat, rest, work, or study. It is this dopamine-seeking activity that makes us want to continue what could be considered the fun stuff. In a dopamine detox or dopamine fast, that is what is attempted to do: to detox or fast, abstain, or decrease the stimulation of and release of increased amounts of dopamine. A dopamine detox, which is a term that has been popularized and transformed more so by the media, was meant to be by the originating Dr. Sipa to be more of a way so to decrease the compulsive behaviors associated with increased dopamine release or dopamine hits, such as emotional eating, which makes people feel better, gaming, phone scrolling, and mindless internet surfing, and binge TV watching, gambling and shopping, whether online or in person, sex, pornography, and masturbation, thrill and novelty seeking or risk-taking, and recreational drug use. A recent study showed the average smartphone use was 5 to 6 hours per day, and video game use was almost 2 hours per day. In a dopamine detox, it is a way to train your brain or retrain your brain. In a way, it's like that song, "You've lost that loving feeling," and we are trying to get it back. So how do we get it back? How do we get back the love for the things we used to love to do, before all of these quick hits and fixes from the compulsive behavior or even addictions that took us over? First, we must understand that people have a baseline amount of dopamine that is floating around in our brains and circulation, and this is what affects our moods and motivation and desires and cravings. There are two pathways in the brain that dopamine uses. One is for movement, and one is the reward, mood, desire, and motivation pathway. Dopamine can also affect heart rate and blood pressure, attention, learning, and sleep. Remember, we need dopamine. If the amount of dopamine is lower than normal in specific areas of the brain, it can cause disorders of movement, such as shakiness and jerk-like movements, as in Parkinson's disease. Dopamine alterations, whether too much or too little, can also affect the psychology of the brain and lead to mental health disorders, such as schizophrenia. Dopamine has two phases or releases, a tonic phase and a phasic phase. In the tonic phase, dopamine is released on a consistent basis, and this tonic phase is part of normal day-to-day function. The phasic phase is where dopamine is released with increased amounts due to a reward and motivational pathway. These two phases interact and overlap, and it's why sometimes we want more of whatever we did or ate or felt. This is the phasic phase, because we enjoyed it. However, then in the tonic phase, the amount of dopamine can be actually reduced or decreased. This is what can lead to a compulsion, and ultimately an addiction, where a person needs more and more of a drug to receive the same feeling or sensation that previously required less of the drug, but more about that later. Think of tonic and phasic activation in the sense of smells. When a person wears a new perfume or cologne, it is immediately able to be smelled. This is the phasic phase. After wearing the scent for a while, the tonic phase sets in, where it becomes a usual and normal scent, no longer stimulating the smell or olfactory receptors of the brain. If a person stops wearing the scent for a while in a cologne or perfume detox, then they would be able to smell it again. So when we now compare this to a particular activity, such as a social media scrolling, gaming, mindless TV watching, etc., this is where a detox would come in. A detox or fasting minimizes or restricts activities that bring pleasure and rewards, thus decreasing the release of dopamine, leading to a type of resetting of dopamine levels, which can make things pleasurable and desirable again, especially in anticipation. Dopamine has a threshold that becomes increasingly more difficult to reach, and also with an increasingly lower reset level. It is what keeps us going back for more and more of it. With gaming, TV watching, social media, or phone scrolling, it is technically a compulsion, not necessarily an addiction, although it may seem like it to others and maybe even to your own self. It is dopamine that propagates this behavior. Then the new baseline level, the tonic phase of dopamine, is decreased from where it started, making the behavior and the associations less enjoyable overall. It is again this dopamine response that leads to substance abuse and true addiction. In the case of a drug addiction, a person needs more and more of a drug to get the same effect. However, when the person comes down or the effect wears off, then they require more and more to reach the same dopamine response, many times at no matter the cost, their own personal health, family, relationships, jobs, etc. It is the release of dopamine that relays the message to the brain as to whether whatever experience was pleasurable or not, whether you should seek out that pleasure again. It is the release of dopamine that makes people feel good and feel better and want more, but it is what can lead to dependence and compulsion and ultimately addiction, with drugs for example. If the reward center in the brain was stimulated, then a person will seek out the same experiences, whether good or bad, healthy or not. Fluctuations in dopamine can lead to unhealthy responses if alcohol or drugs are the rewarding experience, leading to the addiction. Activities that we choose to do are usually chosen over and over again due to the amount of dopamine that is released. Certain activities can release more dopamine than others. For example, some studies have shown that music can increase the dopamine response by 9%. Gaming can increase dopamine by 100%. Chocolate can increase dopamine by 150%. Sex can increase dopamine by 200%. Nicotine can increase dopamine by 250%. Amphetamine use can increase dopamine by 1,000%. And methamphetamine can increase dopamine by 1,300%. So you can see why there is a strong connection to the addictive nature of amphetamine and/or methamphetamine, and the amount of dopamine released and the need to reach those levels over and over again, hence the addiction. For the record, a person cannot stop the production of dopamine in the body, no more than a person can stop the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide within the cells as a natural part of cellular gas exchange when people breathe. Just to mention, even with exercise, dopamine is actually released, which may be a motivating factor in wanting to exercise. But in this sense, health is the after effect and benefit. When a person is conditioned from frequent exercising, and if a person is in a relaxed state, say after one of their workouts, then they will require less gas exchange, have decreased blood pressure, heart rate, and an overall decreased need and or release of dopamine. If a person can refrain and or abstain from activities that stimulate the extra production of dopamine, they may become more relaxed and reflective, introspective, and ultimately more appreciative of the activities that they are avoiding, leading to more enjoyment of said activity. As mentioned, you cannot technically stop the production of dopamine, but you can minimize the activities that stimulate an increased amount, as in a dopamine detox or dopamine fast. Do you remember the first time you got your smartphone, or when you sent and received your first text? What if you could relive that little excitement by putting your phone away from time to time and using that time to read a book, write a letter, sit and talk to a friend in person? That would be a dopamine detox. You would be able to have the ability to turn off that extra sensory stimulation, all while taking some personal time, learning time, or relaxation time. Whether you are refraining from eating certain foods, phone or computer scrolling, gaming, TV binge watching, thrill seeking, sexual pleasure, listening to music, social media, again, that would be a detox. So how do you do a detox, or even start a detox? Start small. For example, start with an hour, then gradually to half a day, then 1 time a week, and on and on. Unplug from the technology or activity. Whatever activity you choose to replace your detox will probably not cause anywhere near the amount of dopamine you are used to, such as reading, studying, writing, meditating, cleaning, physically talking with another person, taking a quiet walk, which some of these may make you feel more bored or even tired than others. You may even ask yourself, why am I doing this detox in the first place? But that's exactly the point, so that eventually you can begin to enjoy the activity that you were detoxing from. If you decide to do a detox, put it in the comments how long your detox was, and if not too private and personal, from what was your detox, and how did it work? For myself, to maintain a healthy and mindful life, I detox regularly by reading, writing, like the script to this video, take walks, short drives, or just have some quiet time. After doing this, I can begin to enjoy listening to music or making videos again, so that I can continue to enjoy the things I like to do. If you enjoyed this video about a dopamine detox, don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, and the notification bell so you can be made aware when new videos are released. So until the next video, go live a healthy and mindful life. Thank you for watching.